Hello everybody. In this PowerPoint presentation, I'm going to explain the direct and indirect objects in sentences. Before we get started, you guys need to understand that an object is a word or a group of words that completes the meaning of the subject and the verb. So I really need to have an object in order to understand fully the subject and the verb, in order to have a subject and a verb complete. Okay? I'm going to give you three phrases actually, because they are not even sentences. Tracy fed, Jack caught, and she sent. So in this case, they are not complete. They are not complete ideas. They are not complete sentences or thoughts. But if we put an object to them, the story changes. Tracy fed the lizard. Jack caught a fish. She sent a letter. All right? Usually, the objects appear right after the verb, and this is something to keep in mind. We're going to start with the direct objects. A direct object is a noun or a pronoun that receives the action of a verb. Okay? One more time. They can be nouns or they can also be pronouns. All right? For example, Janice writes a letter, or Janice writes a letter. So in this case, letter is the noun that is receiving the action. Okay? And what is the action? The verb to write, let's say. In order to find the direct objects, we are going to ask ourselves the questions what or whom after the action verb. This is super important. Let me give you some examples. The old man chewed his food. So you identify the subject and the verb. So after the verb, you're going to ask yourselves, okay, yes, the old man chewed what? And the answer to that question would be the direct object, in this case, food. The number two, the dog dug a hole under the fence. So he dug what? The dog dug what? A hole. So hole, it's the direct object. And Alexander the Great conquered leaders in most of ancient Europe. So in this case, I have an example of the question whom. This guy over here, he conquered whom? Leaders. So leaders would be the direct object in that sentence. Now, as I said before, we are also going to have a direct object pronouns. Okay? In this case, it's a person. Okay, it's a person that is receiving the action, okay, in the sentence. So in this case, we're going to deal with the object pronouns, such as me, you, him, her, it, us, you again, and then them. So they cannot be confused with the subject pronouns, because remember that we can only use these ones in the subject position in the sentence. For example, Bob took who? Okay, took her to work on Monday. Will you please tell? Tell whom? Oh, tell them to come in. I love him. Okay, I love who? Him very much. Okay? Now, we want you to pause this video and do the following exercise. We want you to identify the direct objects in the following sentences. And once you're ready, you can go ahead and play again this video. All right, so now let us check. For the number one, the two boys dug. All right, dug what? Hole. So hole is the direct object in the sand. Michelangelo painted those magnificent murals on the ceiling. So he painted what? Those magnificent murals on the ceiling. So in that case, we have a noun phrase, and that will be totally correct. That will be totally fine to have noun phrases as direct objects. I deposited my savings in the bank. Okay, deposited what? Savings. Next week, we will watch a solar eclipse. We will watch what? There you have the direct object. And for the number five, the wind blew my hat. So what? What did the wind blow? My hat into the air. Very nice. Now we can also have compound direct objects. So do you remember when we discussed the compound subjects and the compound verbs? Well, the same happens with compound direct objects. For example, my sister eats chocolates and other candies. Okay, so my sister eats what? So all this is going to be the compound direct object. The students studied what? Science, math, and history. So the three of them are going to be the direct objects. Now we're going to move to the indirect objects. Now this is something important. In order to have an indirect object, we have to have a direct object. So we cannot have an indirect object unless we have a direct object. Okay? An indirect object can also be a noun, it can also be a pronoun, and it often, not all the time, but it often appears between the verb and the direct object. Okay, so I have the subject, I have the verb. Then most of the time, most of the time I'm going to have the indirect object after, and then after the indirect object, I'm going to have the direct object. Now, in order to identify the indirect objects, we have to ask ourselves the questions to whom or for whom, to what or for what. For example, in these sentences, we're going to identify first the subject. So the scientist gave the students a lecture. Okay? The scientist would be the subject. Gave would be the verb. And now we're going to identify the direct object. So what was the question that we needed to ask ourselves in order to identify the direct objects? All right, so the scientist gave what? A lecture. So lecture would be the direct object. And then in order to identify the indirect, we're going to ask to whom. So he gave the lecture to whom? Okay? To the students. So students would be the indirect object. Miss Peterson would be the subject, told the verb, the direct object news, right? So Miss Peterson told what? The good news. Okay? And the good news to whom? To her son. So son would be the indirect object. Now for the indirect objects, we are going to have these two very useful words, prepositions, for and to. I make dinner for my grandmother and I want to give the earrings to my niece. So as you can see, I make what? Dinner. So dinner is the direct object. Okay? So I make dinner to whom or for whom? For my grandmother. I want to give what? The earrings. To whom? To my niece. So when is it that we use for and when is it that we use to? We use for when the person does the action to help or please another person. So in this case, I want to please my grandmother, and because of that, I'm going to make dinner for her. And then to tell us about the direction of the action. Okay? So my action, the fact that I want to give the earrings, it goes towards my niece. So it goes to my niece. Now, we're going to discuss the position of the indirect objects. The indirect objects can follow two patterns, the pattern A and the pattern B. In the pattern A, I'm going to have first the direct object and then after that the indirect object, and that's when I'm going to use the previous prepositions to and for, and now you know the difference between the two of them. And then we can also follow the pattern B, which is actually first the indirect object and then after that the direct object. For example, people send what? Birthday cards. To whom? To their friends. All right? Or for their friends if they want to please them, right? Now, some verbs follow both of the patterns and it will be totally fine. So you are free to use pattern A or pattern B. What are those verbs? This is a list. For example, cook. I cook what? I cook lasagna, okay? For my boyfriend, okay? That is one of the patterns. And then another pattern can be, I cook my boyfriend lasagna. Okay? And the two ways, the two patterns will be totally correct. Now, there are other verbs that actually require the to or for with the indirect object. So these are the verbs that can only follow one of the patterns. And that pattern was the pattern A. For example, the teacher explains the grammar. So she explains what? The grammar. This is the direct object. To whom? To us. Not the teacher explains us the grammar. So this sentence would be completely mistaken. I have another example here. The teacher pronounces what? The words. For whom? For us. Not the teacher pronounces us the words. Okay, this sentence would be completely incorrect. What are those verbs? So describe, explain, report, and introduce are going to be the verbs in which we are going to use the preposition to. So one more time, I can say the teacher explains the direct and indirect objects to written communication 1 students. Okay, and these are the verbs that follow that use the preposition for. For example, answer. All right, let me give you an example. The teacher answers the questions for us. It wouldn't be the teacher answers us the questions. That would be incorrect. Okay, and here you have some more examples. Now, one more time, we want you to pause again this video. This is going to be the last activity. We want you to pause this video and we want you to identify the indirect objects in the following sentences. And once you're finished, once you're ready, you can click again and play the video. All right, so now we're ready to check. Number 1, she bought what? Okay, some cotton candy. So cotton candy would be the direct object. Okay. For whom? For me. So me would be the indirect object. For the number 2, following the game, we gave. Gave what? We gave a cheer. So cheer would be the direct object. Okay. To whom? To the other team. All right. I left mom a message. So I left mom. Okay. I left what? A message. Okay. To whom? To mom, so she wouldn't worry. Mom would be the indirect object. The company offered what? A promotion. So promotion would be the direct. Okay? So and who did they offer the promotion to? Oh, to my grandfather, to my father. And the number 5, will you bring my brother and me some souvenirs of your trip? So what? What will you bring? Souvenirs. So souvenirs is the direct object. For whom? For my brother and me. So brother and me would be the indirect object. Very nice, guys. Now we are all good to work on the review for the chapter 3. So you can now finish the video, and thank you very much for listening.